Our guest really needs no introduction for our listeners, but for those living in an unweird world where nothing strange ever happens, Amy Bruni is a lifelong paranormal investigator who has not only starred in both Ghost Hunters and Kindred Spirits, which is our favorite, but she hosts her own podcast, Haunted Road, and she's authored two books, Life with the Afterlife, 13 Truths I Learned About Ghosts, and her latest, Food to Die For, Recipes and Stories from America's Most Legendary Haunted Places. How are you, Amy?
I am great, thank you. I'm very busy with promoting the book and whatnot. People are really excited about it, but it also means I get to talk to a bunch of people I've never met before, so I'm really excited about it.
Definitely. Awesome. This latest book is amazing. But before we get into that, would you tell the listeners how you started on your paranormal journey, your adventure in life?
Yeah, so it's been a very long road. So I was always deeply interested in ghosts and spiritualism and the paranormal in general, and I led a very normal life. I worked in health insurance. I lived in Northern California, and but on the weekends and in the evenings, I would investigate places. I was part of paranormal teams. I was doing some research kind of on my own, and then through that, I met some of the cast from Ghost Hunters, and they were working on a podcast. And at the time, I was working on a podcast, producing it, and so they asked me to help them with it was Beyond Reality Radio with Jay and Grant so many moons ago. And so I was helping them with that, and we just became friends over the years. And they came out to film in California at some point, and they asked if I would come along because there were two very large locations and they needed help. And I said yes, and then I just never went home again. I was out there with them for like 7 years, sometimes on the road 300 days a year. And it was really fantastic. I got to go to a lot of great places, investigate a lot of bucket list haunts. But that was really, I mean, I had been doing it before, but that was really where I went, oh, maybe I can do this like for a job, like a career. Maybe I could, so now like my constant mission is just trying to find ways to keep ghosts, as my career in some sense, because I just love it so much. They always say, do what you love. And so I'm always trying to think of unique and creative ways to do so.
Well, you're doing a great job with it. We love your style of investigating, and it really has inspired us because the great thing about you and Adam is that you like to do these experiments
Yeah.
and you've tried all different kinds of things. Do you have a couple of experiments that are like your favorite to do when you go to a location?
Yeah, so Adam, Barry, and I, when we left Ghost Hunters, we started Kindred Spirits, which, as you guys are fans of, and like that was just like a dream come true for us. And a big part of that was just kind of thinking outside the box and, trying to kind of help and assist the living and the dead at the same time. And so what that meant is we were constantly thinking of creative ways to do so, because I have a lot more questions about the paranormal now than I did when I started. Like none of it makes sense, to be honest. And so, but I think a couple of my favorites was I love when we were both doing like the spirit box session or the Estes method at the Fee House in Arkansas, where we were both doing it at the same time and had no idea what the other was saying. And two spirits were literally communicating with each other through us, basically using that method. And that was just like a very compelling experiment. I love experimenting with like separating in locations and bringing in certain items that might trigger activity, or bringing in certain people that might trigger activity. I love bringing in people who know things I don't. I love bringing in like Dana Newkirk to do tarot, or Chip Coffey to do readings. It's just like I will try anything. I'll try whatever, if I think it could get us some sort of answer. And so yeah, there's been a lot of favorites, but those are a couple.
Yeah, I know one of the things that we incorporated into the Estes method is taking the spirit box out and using the dowsing rods, because, sometimes you wonder if you're not controlling the dowsing rods a little bit with your own mind. And so Kelly's really good at that. So I'll have her hold the dowsing rods and put the headphones on her. So, and, blindfold so that she can't hear anything, to see how the dowsing rods react to that.
That'd be interesting to see. Yeah. Because a lot of people, once you put on a blindfold, dowsing rods stop working because there's this whole ideomotor effect that happens. So that's really interesting that it's working for you guys still.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time we tried that was on the USS North Carolina.
Oh, I
So
love that.
we really enjoyed trying that out at different locations.
That's a
Um,
fun place to investigate.
it definitely is. We actually got to do that with Brian and Rochelle
Oh,
a
they're so
few years
sweet.
back. Yeah, they
Yeah.
were great. So Anthony Bourdain once said, I personally think there's a real danger of taking food too seriously. Food should be part of the bigger picture. I think food, culture, people, and landscape are all absolutely inseparable. And your new book really proves that. What made you decide to go with the theme of food and ghost stories?
So it was, I had this kind of like light switch moment. It was a few years ago. Now, this book has been years in the making. Like I think HarperCollins, they loved my pitch, and I think that was like 2.5 years ago we started working on it. That's how much work has gone into it. But before that, even a couple years before that, there was this one day where the Fall River Historical Society in Massachusetts posted on their Facebook page a picture of Lizzie Borden's meatloaf recipe. And it was literally like her recipe card, and it said Lizzie's meatloaf on it, and she had written it down for all posterity. Incidentally, it's really not that great of a meatloaf recipe, but here's the thing, Lizzie made it. And so I was just so fascinated with that because I instantly, like, I'm all about experience and like transporting yourself back in time and really trying to think of like what motivates a ghost or a spirit. And I thought about myself and how me and many people were like food, like the taste of something or the smell of something really triggers you to be like, I am instantly back to this moment, or I'm instantly thinking of this person very deeply. And so I thought, wow, if you could make these recipes from these locations, you're experiencing something that they have experienced, down to the smell and the taste. Like you're not looking at photos, you're not looking at their artifacts, you're not reading about them. You are doing exactly what they did. Um, and so I kind of built on that, and I started paying attention to places that I was going and looking at like their recipes. And so that was really what triggered it for me. Was that moment. And ever since, I just started kind of collecting recipes and stories and lore in my brain. And I have even more than the ones that are in this book. But that's for part two, I guess.
Well, that's so true because when you think about music, you hear a song and it takes you back, and food
Yeah.
does the exact same thing.
Yes, 100%. And like one of the recipes in here, and I talk about it a bit in the introduction, it was so funny. So my mom passed away in 2018, and she had this Caesar salad that she made all the time. Like this was her like thing. She loved the Caesar salad, and she made it so much that it was never written down. And so she passed away, and we all were like, "What about the Caesar salad?" Like we don't have this recipe.
Yeah.
And so one of the recipes in here, which is actually from Sheboygan Asylum, is a Caesar salad recipe. And when I made it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is my mom's, this is what my mom made, this is my mom's recipe." And so it was like really, it was a big sign that I was going the right direction, but it was also just like, wow, that really did transport me back to like times with my mom, sitting outside in the summer eating this salad and just really remembering it. So yeah, it's crazy what our senses, what can be triggered by our senses. It's really important.
Well, the book is gorgeous. I mean, the first thing that catches
Yes.
you is the pictures that go with it. And then I just love that you go to not just some well-known locations, but some that are a little bit more obscure. And then you tell the history, which of course is important anytime you're looking at hauntings. And then you tell some of the ghost stories to go with it. The Excelsior Hotel, I feel like, is one of those, maybe one that people don't know as well. You also have something like, I love how stuff goes with the location, like the
Yeah.
Manresa Castle. This was owned by the Jesuits. And so
Yes.
you have a recipe in there for the Jesuit soda bread. So I
Yes.
thought that was just cool how those two go together.
Yeah, it was. So just talk about the art for just a minute, because that was the first part. It was like, so we had meetings about what we wanted the book to look like. And I was like, I want like a Gothic, colonial, witchy cookbook. That was like, those were my words. And we made like a vision board. And then Harper Celebrate put together just this amazing team who spent 5 days shooting these photos in a studio, food styling. I mean, it's just like absolutely mind-boggling how beautiful these photos are. Like, and I every day they would send me the dailies, and I would like cry at just how gorgeous. I was like,
Aw.
how is this happening? Like, these are, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just. It was just beyond my expectations, and so even if you don't like ghosts, food, or stories, if you like photography, like this book is, they did such an amazing job. So, but yeah, so when I was compiling the recipes kind of to go through, like, I had some very obvious ones, but then once we kind of put it all out on a map, there were some holes like regionally here and there. And some of these places I've never been, not a lot, but there's a few in there that I have. The Excelsior is one, I've never been there, um, but it just, I wanted to make sure that like regionally most everyone was represented. So I picked a few locations that I've always been interested in and, researched them and wrote about them and found recipes associated with them. So that was kind of how that happened. And I'm really thankful for it. So, but yeah, the Excelsior house looks really cute. I want to go there.
It's one
Definitely.
place we haven't been either, and we're like, yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely want to check that out.
And in regards to the photos and everything, nailed it.
They really
I mean,
did. Like,
the way they set up the shots are just incredible. It's gorgeous.
it's unbelievable. I would frame these and put them up in my house, like these
Oh,
photos. Like, they're
absolutely.
like print quality, just beautiful.
Yeah, I normally wouldn't tell people, oh, this recipe book would make a great coffee table book. You wouldn't usually put those two things together, but I'm like, it would be a really good coffee table book.
I only have one copy so far, and I've left it on the coffee table whenever anybody comes over. Like, and I don't really tell a lot of people, like, I wrote a cookbook, like, and they'll just pick it up and go, what is this? Like, they instantly are drawn to like the cover. And that's when I'm like, my job here is done. Like, this is, this is
Love it. Well, you've included several very well-known haunted hotels. We know from reading your first book that Mount Washington Hotel is your favorite. And that sausage recipe sounds amazing. I like to make sausage crepes. And so I'm thinking about tweaking that a little bit and using that recipe for the filling. But I know you're a vegetarian. Do
Yeah.
you have a favorite recipe? Do you sample
Oh yeah,
everything
we made
you
every
make?
one of these. So I'm actually pescatarian, so I eat seafood, but
Okay.
I don't eat
Okay.
like red meat and chicken. So Julie Tremaine, who collaborated on this with me, who's one of my best friends, and she collaborated on my first book with me, and we've done a lot of projects together, so I trust her implicitly. She got to make all the meaty stuff. So she was the one. I did feel really bad when she sent me pictures of Lizzie Borden's meatloaf because she was like, it's just a very, but it's like, it's just how they made meatloaf back then. Like literally like they make the meat and then they cover it in water and like cook it. And so when she took it out, I mean, it's literally just like the meat with all these like onions on top, like floating. But when I say that, I should let people know too, like there are a few historic recipes like that in there, but there are also way more just delicious, amazing recipes,
Yeah.
but I just felt for like authenticity's sake, like some of these recipes had to be like very real and very time relevant too. So,
Sure.
but yeah, but as far as like some of my favorite recipes in there, so we make pretty regularly now, upon request of my family, the peanut soup from the Farnsworth house, or they
The
call it
goober
goober pea soup.
pea. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and like a lot of the recipes in here, you can kind of mix and match and like modify it to your taste. So like for that, I actually just use veggie broth instead of chicken broth, and it's delicious. And so we'll have that with like crusty bread and a salad, and it's like the perfect meal. And there's a lot of protein in peanut butter, so there's
Yum.
but
Yeah.
and then the Myrtle's bread pudding I talk about all the time. I dream of that pudding actually. It's like when they gave me that recipe, I was like, oh my gosh, you're actually giving this to me. Like, because it's their specialty there. They've been known for it, and it's croissant bread pudding. So it's about as sinful as you can get. It's like pudding and custard with like butter croissants, and oh, it is literally to die for. It is so good.
Yeah, I figured that would be one that we'd be making.
Well,
Yes.
I'm a chocolate fiend, so the fudge sauce from the Excelsior Hotel, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yes, and so if you use that, we use that with the Grand Hotel in Mackinac. They're pecan balls or pecan balls, depending on where you are from. But like, it's so good. like that. I'm actually going to the Grand Hotel in August with my daughter, and I
Oh,
can't wait for her
nice.
to like have those in person because we've made them here now so many times. And I'm like, wait till you taste them in the Grand Hotel.
Love it. So, can you share a couple of experiences, maybe your favorite experiences at Mount Washington?
Oh my gosh, the Mount Washington Hotel is one of my favorite places to, it is probably my favorite place to investigate. I'm very lucky because they're very generous and kind and they don't hide from their ghosts there at all. You know, when I asked them for a recipe for this book, they were like, we're going to give you the blueberry sausage that everybody asks for breakfast every day. And that was like a really big deal that they provided that. But as far as experiences there, let me see, I've had so many. So the presidential wing, this is probably one of the wildest ones I've had so far. Well, I've had many, but the presidential wing, which is actually fairly new, I feel like they built that in like 2008 or 9. It is a huge, it's where the spa is, and there's like a bunch of conference rooms out there now. And we were investigating there one night. We were all by ourselves in the big ballroom down there, and we had all the lights out, and we were just like sitting in a circle, and we heard this these little footsteps kind of running around us, this like this like little like scuttling, and all of us like looked toward it, and we all saw this like weird like hunched over little shadow thing that
Huh.
was like running about the room, like and it was not answering anything. I definitely felt like it was some sort of like inhuman type, not something like, you know, not like demonic or something, but
Yeah,
it was something like land associated, I thought, more than with the hotel. And it was like to this day, and now people see it in there regularly. Like the hotel, when I told them that, they were not surprised at all. Like this was something people had reported. And so, and then one of my dear friends told me that she was like, I went to the spa one time, and she's like, I was getting a massage and like everything was fine. She's like, and then it felt like something was just sitting on my chest while I was like, she was like, and I felt like I couldn't stand up, and like, and I mean, that could have been like some sort of sleep paralysis thing or whatever. Because you know how you kind of really drift when you're like between
sure.
sleep, and so it's
Yeah.
probably that, but she's never gone back. And I have been to the spa many times and I have never had anything like that happen. But so that, and then one of the first time I ever walked into that hotel, I walked in, I got there, I had flown from California, because this is when I still lived in California, not New England. And we got in at like 1 or 2 in the morning. So it was very late at night. We come, you know, through darkness for hours. There's nothing up there. And then we come upon this hotel, and it's like this beacon in the night. It's just beautiful, which was just, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this place. So we go in, we check in, and we just start doing like a little walkthrough to kind of see where we're investigating. Because at that time we had booked the whole hotel the whole weekend. And
Wow.
so I went into the ballroom and the lights were out, and we were discussing how we were going to do things and stuff. And then as we were walking, it was just me and one other investigator. And as we were walking out of the ballroom, we both just distinctly heard this woman just go, ha, 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 like laugh at us. And I just went, did you just hear that? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, is this how it's going to be all weekend? And it indeed was. So yeah,
Wow.
I've had many experiences there.
How incredible.
It's always
Yeah,
cool when you have those ones where it's audible like that and multiple people experience it because
it's
you're like, I'm
crazy.
not imagining that.
Yeah, she's a very chatty ghost, the princess. She likes to chat. She likes to open and close drawers in her room, you know, because like her original, so the princess, she died in, I want to say 1926. I could be completely off. I'm just pulling that out of nowhere. But her bed is there that she traveled with. So like in the princess suite, like it's her actual bed, and that's where she spent so much time. And that room is very, very active.
I mean, we like to take our pillows with us, but wow, taking the whole
Right.
bed is really
I
something.
mean, it's so fancy. It's just like the fanciest thing you can think of. And it's all like intricately carved, and this is beautiful bed. And like it was just nothing, you know, they just threw it on the train. She took it to France with her. She took it everywhere. And I can't even
Yeah.
imagine being that fancy.
Well, that was one thing that I said when we actually recorded that episode on the location, that it had to be really well made. I mean, all furniture I think was better made back then.
Yes.
compared to today, but it had to be really well made to be going back and forth to France.
Yeah, and they must, I mean, they clearly they dismantled it and everything and packaged it, but gosh, I mean, wow. I aspire to just be that person that can bring my bed everywhere I
Right?
go. I aspire to have a bed that I want to bring everywhere I
That's
Yes,
true too.
go.
definitely.
You mentioned that Julie helped you with the book and everything. Does she have a story that's connected to the Mount Washington? Was it her and her boyfriend that were there and
Oh no,
his
that was
name?
Sarah and Kyle.
Okay, and his name
Yeah.
came over the spirit box and they weren't even like investigating with you
No,
guys.
no. Those are two of my, I'm actually we're going up to New Hampshire with them tomorrow, but they were just, yeah, the spirit, there's this weird spirit there named Steve that, so basically the story goes like this. So we were investigating in the princess room and someone was doing the Estes method, and not much was coming of it. So Kyle and Sarah were like, we're gonna go to bed because they brought their son and their brother-in-law was watching him and stuff. So they went to bed. And as soon as they left, the spirit box kept going, Kyle, Kyle, it's Steve. Don't you want a party, man? Like Kyle. And I'm like, dude, I texted Kyle, I'm like, this Steve guy really wants to talk to you. And they were like, are you kidding me? Because like in that very moment, like I guess a door had slammed shut in their room and like all the lights went on by themselves. And these are like not ghost people. They're like New England influencers, like super famous.
Yeah.
Like, but they were just there to try something new. Now they come up every year with us. So but yeah, and so he came back to the room and not a lot happened, but then they told me this story about how before we even knew each other, so back before their son was born, every year they would go to the Mount Washington on New Year's Eve and they would bring like a bunch of their staff and stuff and they would like have beautiful parties and take beautiful pictures because that's what they do. And so they would get the princess suite every year. And they said one year they were all like kind of at the end of the night, they were in the princess room and they were all like hanging out and there were a lot of girls there and stuff. And some guy walks in and he's like wearing like old clothes or something. And they're like, hey, and it's New Year's Eve. Everyone's dressed in tuxedos at that hotel on New Year's Eve. And he's like, hey, you guys want to party? You guys got any blow? And like, they're like, no, you're in the wrong room, buddy. Like, you got to go. So they like kind of like told him to leave. Then he came back and he's like, dude, my name is Steve. I just want to party. Where are all the girls? Like, and so at that point they called security. And so they said they called security and the guy leaves. And then security was like, we've not seen this person in the hotel. We don't know who you're talking about. They even like were checking cameras and stuff. And they were like, we don't know who this guy is, but if you see him again, and then that was that. But then years later, in the same room, with a story I had no knowledge of, some ghost comes through and is like, hey, it's me, Steve, and we want to party. Come on, Kyle. Like, what a random ghost.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it makes you wonder, like, was he a ghost when he showed up the first time, or did something happen to him that night, or
Maybe,
what?
Right.
like who knows, right? Someone did dig up that there was a hiker who was staying at the Mount Washington named Steve in like the 80s who disappeared while
Okay.
hiking or died while hiking. I can't remember exactly. And they told me like kind of off the record, they were like, it's hard. Sometimes that happens where people, because they lose hikers every year up there. It's way more dangerous than people realize.
Sure.
And so they said there's been times where like literally they've had to like clear out rooms and stuff for people who like just didn't make it back from hiking, like, every few years. So, which is really dramatic and awful to think about.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Lisbeth's meatloaf.
Yes.
If we remember correctly, you did seem to get some interactions with her at Maplecroft, did you not?
Yes.
Yeah. So it
Okay.
wasn't at the Lizzie Borden house. It was
No, I really don't think Lizzie is present at the mansion. And it's a hard place for me to talk about right now, but like Maplecroft was like one of my favorite places to investigate. And Lisbeth came through loud and clear. She corrected me when I called her Lizzie. She was like, Lisbeth. I was like, okay, won't happen again. And she was, that was one of the experiments we did that was really interesting, where I sat all alone in her parlor and I had a blindfold on in the spirit box, and the camera guy was like way off in the other room filming from a distance, and Adam was downstairs. And he put a walkie next to me and he asked questions through the walkie. So it was just very like it was just very mellow and chill. So it wouldn't be like a really threatening situation for her, basically. And so, and she just started talking and she seemed like kind of fun. And so, like, she was really sassy and like joking around. And like, I know Adam was like, well, do you want to have a party or something? And I can't remember exactly what she said, but she was like, are you going to plan it? Or so like something like, are you going to do the work? Like, it was this kind of thing. It's not, that's not exactly what she said, but it's close. But, and so it was just at the end of it, I pulled off those headphones and I was like, oh my gosh, like I could hang out with Lisbeth. Like she just seems like when I was listening back to how the conversation went and all the EVPs we got, she just seemed really kind of sarcastic and fun.
Fun.
And
Yeah.
then I really kind of, I've really gotten to know her story since. So like I'm not 100% sure that Lizzie is the murderer through all of that. And so yeah, it was a very powerful moment. I remember one of the head of our production company was there, and I remember him being like, "We can't put this in the show. We can't have you saying that you want to be friends with an axe murderer." And I was like, "Yes, you can."
I mean,
I was
that's
like, I don't think she necessarily did it. I'm just saying she was acquitted. Like, why are we so, so, but there's
yeah.
a lot more to the story, clearly.
Well, that's one of the things we were going to ask you if you thought she got away with murder, because we've gone back and forth too. Part of me isn't sure if it was somebody outside of the family or, her other sister doesn't get a whole lot of attention either. And I'm like, she had time and motive and everything too. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that like we'll never know the answer.
yeah.
But I think it's very telling. Like I think most people, if they were accused of murdering their parents, uh, and then they were acquitted, the last thing they'd want to do is stay in the town where it happened. And it's odd to me that her answer was always, I want to be here when the real killer is found, and I want to look everyone in the face who doubted me.
Mhm.
And so that to me says a lot, but it also could just be a very clever, you
Yeah.
know, ruse. But the other thing is like she never was involved in any sort of violence or violent crime ever again. Like nothing around her. She donated a bunch of her money to animal rescues. So yeah, she gave candy to kids out of her car when she drove down the street, and like she was just known for being like a kind individual, if not kind of a hermit in some cases. But yeah, so I don't know the answer, but I'm definitely not ready to be like she absolutely did it, So
Yeah, same. Well, and you mentioned that sarcastic sense of humor, and I definitely think you have our type of sense of humor with the cottage cheese recipe for for the Sealy Rose house.
We're looking at it and going, oh, really? Cottage cheese at the Taylor Rose house.
I'm
And
gonna
of
look it
course,
up
the
right here
daughter
because
pass recipe.
I'm sure you
yeah,
did
so
an
it's
extra ingredient though.
yes, I was very like, and the funny thing with that one too is I was like, first of all, it was called smear case back then. Like, it's called smear case. Which when I saw that recipe, I'm like, what is smear case? And I was like, oh, this is like cottage cheese. And so when they did that, I was like, how are they going to like make this interesting, this photo of cottage cheese? And then when they just like were like, let's just add a skull to it, like, you know,
Yeah,
That's
when
great.
in doubt, just put a skull in the cottage cheese, and you're like,
always.
yes, now I want to make this with a skull. So yeah, there's a
Love
few
it.
recipes in here where I'm like, don't add the poison.
Keep that part out.
Too funny. Love it.
Well, we've been doing the podcast for 10 years. And so we've covered hundreds of locations, but you have a couple in there that we haven't heard of. And I think one of them is in your home state. And because you're in Rhode Island, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I live in Rhode Island.
So there's Rough Point. We'd never heard of that before.
Okay, so this is my secret. So I needed to out Rough Point because every time I go there, they're always like the docents and stuff are like, do you know how haunted this place is? And they tell me these stories. And so I was able to research online that people have been whispering about the hauntings at Rough Point for years. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to talk about this in the book. So I don't know what that's going to do for my reputation around here, but I love the story and I love the Doris Duke Foundation. I actually live in one of their houses, and so
Oh, nice.
Oh, cool.
yeah, and so I have a utmost respect for her and what she did because she did like the whole like it's just such a fabulous cause, and so, yeah, it's the story goes that Doris Duke killed her interior designer in the driveway of that house and got away with it by paying off like the town or the city by doing different things like the Doris Duke Foundation. But it was largely kind of swept under the rug, and then just recently, some guy was like, "Yeah, I was 12 and I saw the whole thing." So who knows? But the statute of limitations is long past. There's been whispers for years and years, but it's true. The staff there every night when they leave, they always make sure they say goodnight to Doris, or things will happen. So.
Interesting.
Nice.
And the
Definitely
pecan
putting that on our
pie is
list.
like, chef's kiss. It's so good.
Oh,
Yeah.
Love pecan pie too.
yes.
Mhm.
You cover pretty much everywhere in America, including Hawaii.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's this is one that's from the Plantation Village.
Yeah. So I've investigated Hawaii's Plantation Village many times. I go to Hawaii every year in March for spring break, and I've gotten to know the people there very well. And so it's a really cool place if you haven't visited. It's kind of it's not off the beaten path. It's very easy to get to, but I don't think it's the first thing people think of when they go to Hawaii. But what it is it's this whole village that are recreations of. So basically, when the sugarcane industry was, well, it still is very big in Hawaii, but it used to be run by a lot of like immigrants, and they would make these kind of individual villages of the workers. So there was like the Portuguese, the Japanese, the Chinese, like they all had different people who worked, and they would kind of stick together and keep all of their customs in place. And so the Malasadas actually comes from the Portuguese house, which is supposedly the most haunted house at Hawaii's Plantation Village. And so it's these Portuguese malasadas, which it's so funny because my partner, he's Portuguese, so my daughters have Portuguese. And so they were very excited when I was making malasadas for the book. It's a lot of work. Now I understand why it was custom to be like Sunday's malasadas day, because it's like, it's a whole assembly line. But the end result is so worth it. Oh, they're so good. But yeah, so the Portuguese house, the story is that there was a man who, in the Portuguese part of the village, he had a daughter, and I could be getting details of this wrong, but supposedly he had a small daughter, and he, during the day, would chain her up in the house, like chain her so she couldn't like get into trouble, and he would go work. And apparently the house caught on fire, and she was.
Oh, no.
I have not been able to verify any of this, historically, and I've dug and dug. But it's something that's been passed down for quite some time. And then also like they put on a haunt there every year to raise money for the village. And so they do like this whole like terror at the plantation village or something. And but the workers, they won't work alone anymore. They used to go places alone, and so many of them had things happen. They now have a rule that they have to travel through the village in pairs, no matter what they do.
Wow.
Yeah. Mhm.
That says a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't just have food in this book, you've also got cocktails.
Of course.
Obviously, connected
Libations.
to New Orleans, you've got an absinthe recipe, but then you also have the Star of India Navy grog. I was just like,
Yes.
wow.
Yeah. Well, I was like thinking because we had a couple Navy recipes. Like I was like, because we do have, I believe, I think a chowder for the USS, the Sullivans or the Buffalo Naval Park. And so I'm trying to look up this Navy grog because the other thing too is I did make these, but a part of my deal with Julie was that she got to test all of the cocktails if she had to eat all of the meat. So
It's like after I had that meatloaf from Lizzie, I need a cocktail.
I know. Yeah, so the Navy grog is pretty, I mean, it's pretty heavy on the booze. It's pretty boozy, but delicious. I also loved, I'm like looking at it. I'm like, yeah, it's like basically rum. Just and some simple syrup.
There you go.
But it's actually quite good. And then it's rum, water, simple syrup, and lime juice. So it's pretty delicious. The other one I loved is Ernest Hemingway's, his Bloody Mary, like his own Bloody Mary recipe, which is very, I think the line is, like I took it directly from his recipe, where he was basically like, he kind of insults you if you don't put a lot of vodka in it. He's like, I think what's the line? I have to find it now. I'm like, it cracks me up. He's like, I think he says, so it's 1 pint vodka, and he says, if you get it,
Whoa.
he says, if you get it too powerful, weaken with more tomato juice. If it lacks authority, add more vodka.
There you go.
That gives it some
But this is
authority.
for a pitcher, I should add. Like, this is not 1 pint vodka. No, yeah, this is for an entire pitcher. This serves 4 people, which is still, that's a heavy pour.
That is a very heavy pour.
I might have to try that though. I love Bloody Marys.
Oh, they're so good. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they don't have that up at the wall at his house. We actually were there last year. We had our honeymoon down there, and so we went
Oh,
and checked out
so
his
nice.
house. And we
His
probably
house is
shouldn't.
amazing.
No,
It
it is.
is.
And we probably shouldn't tell you we live about 20 minutes from Walt Disney World.
Oh my gosh. Did you guys go all the time? I saw your Madame Leota behind you. I was like,
We've been annual pass holders for a number of years. Yes.
oh, God, I'm surprised we haven't run into each other. I go there all the time with Steve and Dave, and just Charlotte too, but
And
like
Charlotte, yeah.
they're my Disney buddies.
Yeah, we'll see you
Nice.
posting on Instagram. I'm like, dang it, Amy was just there. We missed her.
I know I had to start later gramming it a lot because people would find me really
Oh,
fast.
yeah, you don't want that.
So,
Sure. Yeah.
which is not necessary. Like I love meeting people, but sometimes it would be like at the, the worst times.
Yeah, well, and you don't want to stand and talk for like 15 minutes unless you're
I
standing.
don't mind, and I don't mind at all. I'm a very chatty person, but it would be like, Charlotte would be having a meltdown or something. So,
Let's go on that ride.
yeah.
I don't blame her.
But you did mention that there are some recipes that people, may not make. It's just they're part of the book. And you have haunted jails in there and a recipe for hardtack. I don't know how many people are going to make hardtack.
I know, yeah. And then the other one is Nutriloaf, which is
Yes.
that is from the Eastern State Penitentiary.
Yeah.
And like, it's literally, you can tell they just made something that had some sort of sustenance so they didn't die, but it was just so awful. Like, it's literally just like gelatin, breadcrumbs, powdered milk, ground beef, American cheese melted. Honestly, this sounds better than like some of the other ones I found. There were some I found that were like cornflakes, and like there were a few Nutriloaf recipes out there. So I picked the best one.
It didn't have sawdust in it, at least.
It didn't have sawdust. So if you ever, like, if your kids, if you ever want to punish them, you can be like, well, tonight's a Nutriloaf night. Good job. Consequence. But I mean, honestly, I think some of them are worth a try if you want to like really relive that moment. But but most of the recipes are not Nutriloaf.
Yes, most of them are very good.
But I had to throw those in there. I felt like like I said before, in order to be like, true to the genre, there had to be a few in there that would make you think about whether you actually wanted to make it.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
it's interesting. It's culturally interesting. You
Yeah,
get to see
for
this
sure.
is what these people experienced back then and how much better it definitely is today. Because we know the
Yes.
jails back then, you didn't want to get
100%.
thrown into jail for nothing back then.
No.
So do you have a favorite recipe out of all the ones that are included in the book?
I have a few. I mentioned it already. The bread pudding is definitely
Ah,
like
yeah.
up there. And then there's one that like kind of surprised me. It's the lighthouse potatoes from the lighthouse in Connecticut. I think it's the Lighthouse Inn is what it's called. But those potatoes are like, they're very, very good. They're not calorie friendly, but they are delicious. So, and then like I said, I also make the goober pea soup quite a bit. A surprise, like a sleeper for me, like I didn't expect it, was the vegetable soup from Waverly Hills was like actually quite good. And so and it's very easy to make. And I can see why it would be something you would give to tuberculosis patients, but like we all really liked it. So like I've made it a few times and like I froze a bunch of it too. It freezes really well. So that was a surprise. But There's so many, I can't pick. The Caesar salad, oh, the Alcatraz, the cinnamon sugar cookies from Alcatraz are really tasty. Though I know that everyone loved Mary Todd Lincoln's almond cake. That's on the cover. It's beautiful and delicious. I mean, yeah, there's some good ones. There's a lot of good ones, actually. I should have eaten lunch because I'm starving.
Now you are hungry.
I'm getting hungry.
Well, our final question is one that we ask everybody that we have a paranormal conversation with. We know, like us, you don't claim to know what a ghost is, but if somebody comes up to you, what are some theories that you throw out about what is a ghost?
Well, so my prevailing theory is that many ghosts are actually the spirits of people who have passed away. That's just from my evidence and my experience. Like it's some sort of energy that they have left behind, and it's intelligent and can communicate. But I also think overwhelmingly a lot of our ghosts come from us. I think that we create a lot of activity by our own energy and motivations, and then I also think that our own energy can also exacerbate paranormal activity in homes, and so that's kind of like I have a ton of theories, and like you said, like I will never claim to know that what a ghost is or whether it even actually exists. I just tell people what my experiences have been. But those are kind of just what I encounter more often than not. It's all very energy based. And so that's why I always tell people, think of your own energy before you investigate, and like, where are you energetically at that moment? Because that's going to kind of determine how your investigation goes. Not that it's going to be any more or less dangerous or anything like that, but just so I always try to go in with like a really good positive headspace, just so I can get really good positive interactions.
Very good advice.
Well, thanks. I try.
You exceed. You do very well. We admire everything that you do.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I always feel like, I don't know, I wish I had more, like when people ask me, I wish I had like more definitive answers, but that would be fibbing. I don't.
Well, like you said, the more you investigate, the more questions you have. 'Cause
Yeah,
we've had so
100%.
many things happen that it's like, I can't explain that. Or just with us, synchronicity goes
Hmm.
on and on and on. And it's like, what is that? Am I supposed to be getting a message here? Why does
Right.
this connect to this? And we never know. Why
No,
why did those things coincide with each other?
How about the
exactly.
lotto numbers? I mean,
Yeah.
give me the lotto numbers.
Exactly. If it
And
were
we can
only that we're
investigate all
that
the
easy. I
time.
used to say that to Chip Coffee, and he'd get so mad at me. I'd be like, "Why haven't you won the lottery yet, Chip?" And he'd be like, "That's not how it works."
I love him.
Well, I doubt a lot of psychics out there, but Chip is one that I definitely trust.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I think any psychic that is willing to like look at themselves and admit that they're not always right, and not
Yeah.
talk in absolutes, kind of like us, is are really the ones that you want to pay attention to. The ones who get upset if you question them and you're like, so everything you say, I have to just believe, and there's nothing I can do. Those are the ones you have to watch out for.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Amy, can you share with everybody where they can find out more about you, where they can get the book? And I know you just launched the Paranormal Circle. So will you tell us a little bit about
Yes.
that too?
Absolutely. So everything about me you can find on my website, amybruni.com, and all my social media is at Amy Bruni on every platform. The Paranormal Circle is something that I've been working on for a very long time. It's basically an online membership community that is completely dedicated to the paranormal. And it's a very safe space for people who are really into ghosts, because there's no one trolling. Everyone's on the same page. Everyone's discussing ghosts. There's live cameras positioned in haunted locations. There's live streaming investigations. You can just, it's funny to me how many people go to the like live cams, which they're currently at the Belvoir Winery in Missouri, in the Oddfellows Asylum, like in the nursing home. So people will just go and like put the cameras on their TV and like have them on in the background, so it's things like that. We do in-person meetups at paranormal conventions and at any of my talks. We have discounts to all sorts of cool retailers like Ghost Stop, and honestly, we just signed Harridan Vodka for discounts. So if you're looking for a pint of vodka for your
Bloody Mary.
because they make this amazing like haunted vodka. I'm just obsessed with them. But and I'm trying to think what else. But yeah, I just like to have a place where everyone can go and talk ghosts and not feel weird about it. And also there's a complete drought in paranormal TV and stuff right now while everybody figures out what's going on next. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, hey, I've got the answer for you. So it's really fun. I spend entirely too much time in there, to be honest. So.
Well, we're glad that you found something else to do, because when we heard that Kindred Spirits wasn't coming back, we're like, no.
Well, we have not actually, that's not definitive. We're actually,
Okay.
Good.
yeah, a lot of people keep saying that, and we just haven't, we're just kind of in limbo. We actually just got a call the other day from a network who is interested in picking it back up. And so
Okay.
it's more about maybe finding a new home for it because Travel Channel doesn't exist, but I wouldn't shut the curtains on it just yet.
Awesome. Good
Yeah.
news. Good news. And of
Yeah.
course, your strange escapes. Those are awesome.
Yeah, so I do those all over the country. If you want to go on a haunted vacation, hang out with me. Just go to strangeescapes.travel for all those. And I should also say I did just wrap a series that's going to premiere in the fall. So there is TV coming back, but
Very good.
Very good.
yeah.
Head over to the Spectral Circus in Missouri.
Yes, oh my gosh, it's going to be so fun. I can't wait.
We're eyeballing it. We
Yeah.
might be there.
You should go. You would love it.
We
Oh
love
my
circus stuff and the
I
things.
brought
Yeah.
a bunch of like new faces there too that I'm excited about. So,
Very cool. All right, Amy, thank you so much for joining us again.
of course, thanks for having me. It was nice to see you.
It was nice
Nice
meeting you as
meeting
well.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
All right. Bye.